Oh, so I'd like to introduce Dr. Sanjay Rishi, Systems Management 1985 from Florida Tech. He is currently Chief Executive Officer of JLL Work Dynamics for America, a Fortune 500 company headquartered in Chicago. JLL is the second largest public brokerage firm in the world and was just named one of the world's most admired companies by Fortune magazine. At JLL, Dr. Rishi has helped large global businesses leverage technology to uncover better, smarter, and more innovative ways of working. He has a deep expertise in complex businesses, transformational change, and the development of disruptive technologies. Sanjay joined JLL in 2018 from IBM, where he established and led IBM's industry-leading global cloud application services businesses, focused on cloud technology and cognitive computing to drive digital transformation that not only helps organizations succeed, but dramatically changes the way industries do business. Before that, he served as Chief Information Officer and Group Vice President of Strategic Planning for Johnson Controls Automotive. He has also had roles as partner for PwC and Vice President for IBM Global Strategy. Sanjay is also a member of JLL's America's Executive Committee, which sets the direction and strategy for JLL in the region. Sanjay holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from BIT Mesra, did I say that right?
Yep.
A Master of Science degree in Systems Management from the BIS College of Business at Florida Tech, and a doctorate in management from Walsh College. He currently serves on the board of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Sanjay has 2 adult daughters and is joined today by his wife, Nia. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Welcome all of you to welcome Dr. Sanjay Rishi.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you all for being here. It's such a pleasure. It's such a privilege to be back on campus at Florida Tech. I was reminded I shouldn't say Florida Institute of Technology, but Florida Tech. And I think it's a lovely name, and it's got just the ring about it. I'll spend however much time as you would like me to, but I thought I would do a few things. Obviously, huge thanks. This campus has given so much to us, my wife and I. We wouldn't be able to do the things that we have done. And John and I were talking about this very early, and he asked me, paraphrasing John's words, what is it that Florida Tech gave you? And I think those of you that are here from Bogota, from India, from other parts of the world, you come to these shores. I was a 21-year-old starry-eyed kid who thought he was older than he was and knew more than he did. You've got curiosity. I will say I had no fear, which is really interesting, because you don't know what you don't know. So I never worried about anything, but at the same time, you're coming to a completely different, I'm talking 1984. So stark differences. India is a very different place today. 5th largest economy, prosperity, all of that. We were both fortunate to grow up in a family that was well off. So it wasn't for lack of sort of financial growth, but for opportunities and curiosity and travel, which has continued to be our mantra through our married lives. But what Florida Tech gave us was, a home which was free from judgment, free from any sort of constraints, and it really allowed, I can say all of this now. At that time you don't know any better, so you didn't know what you were getting. But I think this place just has something very special about it. You're not in a group or in an environment which is under stress, whether it is from being in a city, being in areas that may be safe or unsafe. It's a very safe place. Used to be, I imagine it still is. But it was also a very safe environment academically to do what we wanted to. I was fortunate enough to get a teaching assistantship and a ride. And even as a 21, 22-year-old, there was no judgment around it. I was teaching computer science to undergrad juniors who were about my age or a year or two younger. But it really allowed me to sort of spread my wings. And if I talk to anybody, and I've talked to a few students that were considering Florida Tech, and one of the things I've said is, your foundation has to be in a place that allows you to do these things. You're sitting there, and you did your marketing, and do you agree with me, right? This place that just allows you to be who you are, and that was a big thing. We got married while we were at Florida Tech, so we've got some really special memories. I used to live across Babcock and come up here, and I've got stories that I could tell you just from my experience at Florida Tech. But really a wonderful, wonderful experience. So what I thought I would do, and we'll keep it really interactive for those of you that watch us later, stop me anytime, please ask questions. But I thought here's what I would do. I think in threes, as you will learn quickly. Somebody taught me, one of my mentors, and that's what stuck with me. And I'll talk about this around communication, but there was a research done, I think it was at HBS research 20, 30 years ago, and it talked about, and Dean will correct me if I'm wrong, it talked about what does an individual retain, and 3 was the optimal number. Beyond 3, 4 or 5, yes, but it starts to, the retention starts to go down. And I took this to heart about 20 years ago when this mentor talked to me about it. And I actually did my doctoral work around communication, so it's a passion of mine. But I think in threes, I truly do. So I thought I'd share 3 things with you. One of the things I thought I would do is start with students at Florida Tech and how the world of work is evolving around the world of work, the workplaces, how are they evolving. It's part of it is the pandemic, part of it is technology, part of it is this world of hybrid, remote. There are interventions and changes happening in our lives at work, and they are dramatic. They are once, not in a generation, but probably in a century in many ways. These are fundamental tectonic shifts in work and in workplace that are happening. 50 years from now, we'll still talk about the post-pandemic work culture that was created, the workplace that was created, and how we started to interact with workplaces. So I'll talk a little bit about that from the eyes of all of us that are in the workplace, but also will be in the workplace soon. Those of you that are students, you will be in the workplace, and what do you have to look forward to? I'll talk a little bit about your responsibility as students, because I think this generation that is students, whether you're undergrads or graduate students, you have an opportunity to make a difference in the world like never before. I think those of us that are part of, we were both 1985 graduates, we did what we did in our lifetimes, but in the working lifetimes, because I hope to God I don't have to work another 20 years. I think I've worked long enough. But the working lifetime of the generation that's graduating now, you have an opportunity to make a difference. In fact, you have an imperative to make a difference, because if you don't, guess what? Your next generation and your next generation are going to inherit a world that none of us will be proud of, and you sure won't be. We won't be around to see it, but you will be. So I think there's a responsibility. And then lastly, what I'd like to do, if you guys are okay with it, and we can move this around as you see fit, is share with you, for what it's worth, what I wish somebody would have told me when I was graduating in terms of leadership as an individual, all of that. And it's almost like, even if somebody had told me, would I have grasped onto it? Would I be able to internalize it as a 21, 22-year-old graduating with a wife and trying to see the world with our eyes? But that's going to be 3 more things. Okay, so that's 3 times 3. All right? Fair enough? Yeah? So please stop me at any time, and I'd love to be interrupted and ask questions. Ted gave an overview of JLL. We are a Fortune 185, 187, depending on which year it is, company. We've got 105,000 people across the world, including Colombia. And I have been fortunate to have had roles that are all global at IBM, at JCI, at PricewaterhouseCoopers for the last 20 years. Every continent. I've traveled 3-4 times a year, if not more. And you do have a lot of learnings. But one of the things that's happening, and I'll start with the first topic, which I thought I would speak to, which is, how is the world changing? How's my work going to be different? And how's the workplace going to be different? And why? and what should I take away from that? So if you think about what is happening in the workplace, and John was kind enough to sort of talk about the book that I wrote with a couple of my team members, and in that we talked about the workplace and work is getting more personalized, more responsible, and really more experiential. And I'll start with the last one first. If you look at our lives, experience has a very different meaning today than it did when I was graduating from Florida Tech or through most of my career. Our lives are shaped with the iPhone. And I get this, I ask this question, and most people say, well, iPhone's been around for a long time. The iPad's been around for a long time. No, really, it's a 15-year phenomenon, right? I mean, this stuff started late, first decade of this century. But our lives are shaped with it. I mean, making reservations. We just went to Disney. The first time she and I went to Disney just by ourselves, without our kids, since 1985. We've gone there many times with our kids, but I tell you, and we were kids. We were we were doing Space Mountain and all that stuff, right? But lives have changed, right? The experience of using a Disney app to make reservations and getting into a line faster, and if all of that's happening in our personal lives and everything we do, right? Uber or everything you do in your house, you go to your workplace and it's like you're going back 20 years, isn't it? Can you change your temperature? Do you know who is going to be in the conference room before, after, or during the time that you need the conference room? And this is pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, do you know who's coming to work? Do you want to be at work? Are you going to have anybody in the office? Or is it going to be 4 people and you're showing up because somebody told you you're going to show up? Do you have to show up? Do you have to show up Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays? Or do you have to show up 5 days a week? What kind of flexibility do you have? Oh, by the way, is the place you're going into, does it have clean air? Has it been sanitized? Do you feel safe? Not safe as in physical harm. Well, it is physical harm if air's not being circulated frequently. All of these things that are happening in the workplace are as a result of the change that the pandemic brought, but much of that had started earlier. The pandemic exacerbated the problem and thankfully brought in investments into the space about design, about feel, about what the workplace feels like. It's not just about having orange seats and yellow seats. Some of us saw orange seats in 1986. Trust me, I saw one. But it's about being able to interact with the workplace. It's not about what Google and Amazon and Meta and every other Microsoft have done over the years successfully about creating a workplace that has amenities, right? I have a barista. You do. These are all big clients of ours. Do you really go to the workplace anymore because there is a barista? Or would you rather just go around the corner to a good coffee shop and work from the coffee shop? The amenity in the workplace is us. It's people. And that's what people are coming back to. Those of you that have come back to the office, you come back because I'm going to run into Ted and I'm going to talk to John and I'm going to exchange this idea. It's the old water cooler. I don't think we have water coolers anymore, but even if we do, it's the old water cooler. It's these unplanned, accidental collisions at work that create the energy, that create innovation, that create culture. One of the biggest things and I'm in boardrooms and CEOs, we all talk about this on a very regular basis. One of the biggest challenges for people that are running large companies is, what is the culture of my company and how do I create it and how do I sustain the culture of the company that I have? You can't create a culture with screens that are about this big, with staring as much as you want to read body language across the screen. You can't have a sense of affinity. You can't have a sense of belonging that you can create. Because guess what? Life is very portable anymore. Workers are portable. I imagine this is in the academic world, it is no different. If I can teach and you can teach and you can teach, do you have to be in a classroom anymore? How many classrooms Ted, have been virtual through the pandemic. And I imagine you're thinking about and you're planning a hybrid classroom. And this change has happened, and we've done a lot of research. JLL's got the largest research arm in the industry, if you will. And this change is here to stay. The pendulum is not going to swing back to 2019, where you go I don't know who worked 9 to 5. I never did, but that's the term, right? Did you guys ever work 9 to 5? No, right? So you went to work, you came back. You don't go to work anymore, you just work. It doesn't matter. The workplace isn't where you go to work. The work is done from where you are. It could be a coffee shop, an airport lounge, any of this. And hybrid is one thing that's here to stay. But there's some interesting dynamics that are going on. And I'm going to switch just a little bit to again talk about you as students and those that are going to graduate soon and get into the workplace. If you think about the millennials, and by the way, millennials are in our boardrooms. They are CEOs, they're CXOs, they're 42 years old, 43 years old, depending on how you count millennials. They're not young kids that are doing stuff. They are running companies, they're running hospitals, they're working in government, and they're making decisions, and the millennials are driving the economies of today, right? So if you think about the millennials, they are making decisions that are very different. They're the most empowered generation. And if you go to the Gen Y, Gen Z after that, and it's in a very, very fortunate, I wish I had. And some of you that are contemporaries of mine, don't you wish, when was the last time you said, I'm going to make a choice? And I was a poor immigrant, okay? I didn't bring anything from my dad. So when I came here, I mean, it was hand to mouth, right? If you didn't work, you didn't have the choice to say, where's my passion? Or my values don't align with the values of this company. And therefore, goodbye, because I'm going to go do something that I want to do. Oh, no, sir. No, ma'am. You went to work because you had to work. You had mouths to feed, a future to build. Not anymore. How fortunate are you? How fortunate are you as a new generation? And this is across the globe. It could be anywhere, in South America, in Japan, in China, in India, in Europe, and definitely in the US. But that comes with a sense of responsibility. But if you just think about that, right? Using technology in the workplace, collaboration, creating this culture. So CEOs struggle with the shift of power. And that power has shifted from organizations to individuals. So I'll give you a few examples. I worked very early in my career. After Florida Tech, I went to work at General Motors. And you had your cube, and you had your boss, and your boss's boss, and your boss's boss. You did what you were supposed to. You went to work. If you wanted to take some time off, you got some permission to do that. If they said you can't take time off, you didn't. There were years that we didn't take vacations because work was too important. I was part of the early airbags were just starting. God, I'm dating myself. But hey, it's the truth, right? So airbag manufacturing was just starting. Traceability of, because it comes with little inflators. If you don't know this already, when you get in your car, this will give you a sense of comfort. There's an explosive in there. That's what deploys it. That explosive is manufactured by the same guys that manufacture explosives. So if you get nervous, don't be. It's tested very well. When we were first starting, it was a little different story. But now you think about the empowerment that individuals have in the workplace, the designs of the workplaces. We're doing work with a lot of technology companies now where immersive is now. It's not tomorrow. Holographic presence in a conference room is now. It's not pie of the sky. It's not Disney's whatever ride, Imaginarium or whatever it's called. It's happening today, where conference rooms are immersive conference rooms, where you could be on a whiteboard either virtually or physically, and you can collaborate. That's the future of work today, where holographic presence, this is happening today, I'm not making this up. People are meeting with clients with holographic presence. Accenture is one example of a company, but there's so many others. I'll keep the names of the technology companies because we're doing this work for them, designing conference rooms. But it's all about having presence in the room. Ted could be sitting in his office here at Florida Tech, and Sanjay could be there, But the two of us, if we're collaborating on something that is a business opportunity to get training, as an example, we could be in the same room virtually but holographically, and people can see our body language. They can see Sanjay moving his hands, because he does move his hands a lot. But all of this matters, right? So the workplace has changed, but it will be going forward hybrid. People will choose when to come to work. That pendulum, although it'll shift back a little bit, so you guys are really lucky. You'll decide that Mondays is not, I'm not coming to work Mondays, sorry. And you have the power to do it, even with the economic shifts, which does matter. And as we're coming up to, some might say a technical recession, some might read the news and say, okay, this tech company or that big energy company has laid off this retail company. There'll be a bit of a balancing out. But talent, as portable talent is, that's not going to go away. And talent is so much more global. One of the things that's happened in the world of work is, 20 years ago, we were talking about access to technology has been democratized, right? Internet came in, and people that were in Africa and in India and in South America and everywhere that were for centuries devoid of access to technology got access to technology. Guess what the pandemic did? The pandemic democratized access to work. Because what access to technology did was democratized access to aspirations, right? So if you were a kid that were in sub-Saharan Africa, you didn't even know what to imagine. You didn't know what to aspire for. Maybe you saw a Ford or a General Motors truck go by, but you could never even think about, aspire for, I might go work for this, or a jet, or whatever you want to call it, retail, anything. Access to technology said, oh, I can have that. You mean that's available? You mean people can do this? So when you have access to aspiration, all of a sudden you want it. And not the only way to have that is not to get, accepted to Florida Tech and come to these shores to make your future. It is to do it where you are. And that access to aspiration has led to access to work. Can you do work from sub-Saharan Africa? You betcha. Are you doing it? You betcha. It's happening today. It's been happening, but it's accelerating because organizations are finding this is not about offshoring, onshoring, outsourcing, nearshoring, near sourcing. It's not about that. Work has to be done, and it's going to be done in the most efficient way, the most productive way, in a way that organizations can maintain culture, and those of us as in the larger population of working and decision makers that want to wish away, you're going to fail. You have another thing coming because there is a balance that will happen. While all the post-pandemic trauma is driving supply chains to come back to near shores, there's all of this, yes, that will happen. But at the same time, people will work from everywhere, right? So I started to blend my 1 and 2. John, how am I doing on time?
Planning.
All right, give me a time and I'll try to question.
Yeah, you might have to repeat it for the people online, but this evolution that's occurring and the technology that's now, is this going to make business travel obsolete? When is there the need to interact face-to-face?
The question is business travel. Does it become obsolete because of hybrid, because of virtual? I think there's an opportunity to optimize costs. I mean, I'll give you a few examples, and I won't just talk about my company because our company works with all Fortune 500, Russell 2000 companies. So I have a window into that and my experience at big companies, the ones you've heard of. There were times till very recently, in fact, that happens today, that you're having a meeting in Singapore and you need 32 people. When was the last time 32 people contributed to any decision anywhere? So I think there's an opportunity to optimize who comes. So business travel starts to mold to more productive forums and so on. Having said that, the eyeball to eyeball connection, we are human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens. As human beings, we want to shake hands and kiss cheeks and talk to each other and break bread and develop relationships and make decisions and struggle through struggles and come up with solutions. So business travel doesn't go away. And in fact, this is the big topic of debate is culture, innovation, creativity. Can it happen in a completely virtual world? Categorically, no. But does it start to mold itself to more prudent decisions? I think so. And our research, this isn't just Sanjay's thoughts and ideas, but we've done a lot of research around what does happen, what kind of productivity. Out of the pandemic, there were companies that were saying, I can be productive. I don't need people back. Twitter was one company that said very early, I don't need people. This was pre-Musk. All right. But it was one of the first companies, and there were several companies that were saying this. Well, of course people are productive. You don't have golf courses to go to. You don't have restaurants to go to. You don't have movie theaters to go to. You don't have a theater, Broadway. You're sitting at home. What are you going to do? Work. Right? You just can't go outside. By the way, you can't even go out for walks in certain parts of the world. So what are you going to do? Of course, productivity went up. Guess what happened when everything opened? Yeah? We have a client that shall remain nameless also that started measuring patent filings through the pandemic and after. No surprise. Once things started to open up, patent filings went down. During the pandemic, patent filings went up. That's just one. Coding, productivity, all of those kinds of things. So long answer to your question. But John?
At JLL, you guys were in a really, almost a unique world when the pandemic hit because you guys had to figure out what you were going to do, but also figure out what everyone else is going to do because that's what you do.
Yeah.
How did JLL handle that? It's almost the double whammy of a pandemic kind of.
Yeah, it's interesting. University of Michigan asked me for a business, their MBA class, to write up a case. And their graduating class last year, this was their case around how do you deal with all these. So we have three businesses. We're a financial broker related to commercial real estate. We do nothing with residential, but commercial real estate. So that can be multifamily, it can be multi-use, so, apartments and malls and shopping centers and offices and distribution centers and data centers and every other kind of real estate class. We bring capital to it. So we're financial brokers. We're also brokers in the traditional sense. And then we manage everything. So all of the engineering, I have 10,000 engineers in my organization that are in trucks going fixing air conditioners, so on. So different parts of our business started to see either dips during the pandemic or acceleration because of all the needs that were coming in. And the sort of, I'm answering your question with a case that I wrote up because of all of these changes, because most organizations struggled with the pandemic in their own ways. Not that one was more, one was less, but we were trying to balance inflows of capital, availability of construction with supply chains the way they were. And of course we were trying to balance all of this focus on efficiency, predictive maintenance, on clean air. And around the world it was different because if you were in Hong Kong or in Asia, as an example, in many parts of Asia, in Bangalore, Nina, you don't have as much square footage for more than, not even two people. And it's not uncommon in many parts of the world where you've got more people from the family that are working from the same house. So they want to go to work. So all of these dynamics were going on. And of course we had scenario 1 through 4. Thankfully we never had to execute 4. But it's about optimization of cost. But I think one of the things we found was there's new ideas, new value you can create. And if you look at the electrification of vehicles, how it took off during the pandemic. If you look at the hospitality industry and what's happened with consolidation. If you look at energy, if you look at banking and how it's evolved, my industry, our industry, and how it has changed, the pandemic just accelerated just about every industry on the planet to think differently about value that can be delivered to organizations. So again, long answer, but John, just some thoughts around other questions. Otherwise, I'll give you a few more thoughts and ideas, and yeah, keep going. Yeah.
So culture is a strange thing because every organization tries to develop its own culture to increase its productivity.
Yeah.
So how do you manage the variances between these different entities that you support and their culture to make them more productive?
Yeah, and at the risk of adding to the dean's thoughts, if I could, I'm a graduate of the business school, so I have to be careful. I think organizations, I mean, here's how I think about culture, right? It is about productivity, but it's also about creating lasting value. And productivity in itself, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, Dean, productivity is, and I say this to my counterparts and in boardrooms all the time, if you're focused on productivity, you're doing the wrong thing. Because you can squeeze a lemon, a lime, an orange only so much, right? You need to be thinking about the fruit being bigger than what it is. You need to be thinking about where value is and where are the adjacencies. We do M&A every day, every month, every year. Every organization, large organization, whether small or big, thinks about mergers and acquisitions, partnerships. This is a world of ecosystems. One of the things that's happened over the last 20 years, I would say, but especially now, yes, companies compete with companies, but ecosystems compete with ecosystems. Think about what Tesla has done, classic example. Is Tesla competing with every other automotive manufacturer? Sure it is. But one of their differentiators, and we own a Tesla and have for about a year, coming up another month or so, is they've created an ecosystem of energy providers, of charging stations, of repair, of roadside assistance, of experience. Back to that word, of experience. That is just unbelievable. And people will keep gravitating towards the experience you create. So how do you create a culture that inculcates this idea of value? And that has to be, and I'll pick a responsibility, that was one of the three things we talked about. Again, this new generation, newer generations, after mine anyway, sustainability is big. People vote with their hearts, their minds. Diversity, equity, inclusion is extremely important. And people vote with their hearts and minds on where they want to work. I'm a woman. I am black. I am Indian. I am Hispanic. I am this. I'm that. And am I welcomed? Am I truly, truly respected? The old glass ceiling, does it exist in this organization or not? Because guess what? I can make as much money now here as I can somewhere else. So creating that culture, and one of the challenges is opportunities and challenges. The opportunity is the individual of today, the employee of today has that voice. The challenge is if they don't raise their voice and don't make those decisions, then, if you look at Europe, environment, sustainability, every big corporation around the globe has made a 2030, a 35, a 40 commitment on net zero, carbon neutral. And I get to do this because I get paid to do this, is go ask the hard questions in boardrooms. And one of the things I ask is, so, what's your plan? How far are you? What are your metrics? Who are your KPIs? Who's managing it? Who's leading it? Do you have the subject matter expertise? It's fun, right? You can ask these questions. By the way, we ask ourselves this question. We're betting on this and have bet on this with our own organizational dollars because we think, now, here's a fun question to ask. How much do you think carbon emissions come from vehicles, from airplanes, from, I don't know, railroads, and from buildings as a percentage? Which one is the... I know it's a loaded question, but this is my industry, so I can tell you 40% of carbon emissions come from built environments. 40%. So if every one of us did our part in energy usage, and my wife has given me a hard time about this I say hard time, but about energy usage. I used to get yelled at home for leaving lights on and stuff, even when I was a kid. But we had our summit last year in Copenhagen, and I came back it was a sobering statistic. From the time I was born to today, the number of species that existed in the world, you're nodding, so you know where I'm going with this. almost 30% or more, depending on which statistic you pick up, that those species don't exist. They've become extinct in my lifetime. And listen, I'm old, but I'm not that old. All right? 30%. So we're handing over to our children and our grandkids a world with 30% less species. Now, they could be microorganisms, they could be this, but that changes the world. So the culture, back to the culture, because I am passionate about this, is creating a culture where a sense of belonging is important, because from that comes this idea of ecosystems and value generation, true differentiation, a competition. Because at the end of the day, let's not make no mistake, right? We're in for all of that, but we're also here to create individual organizational lifestyles, whatever that might be. And that comes from value generation. It's not just about being philanthropic.
So how do you create a culture that will create shareholder value?
Yeah, stakeholder capitalism. So it's not just about doing the right for the world. The world as it is changing now, Ted, I might suggest, people are making decisions with their wallet. People are buying Teslas because they have the experience, but also because it's carbon friendly. So increasingly, I'm going to exaggerate to make a point, right? Dismissing all of these things for shareholder values, those days are gone, right? But now it is about shareholder value, and that's why this idea of work that is democratized, about getting work done in the most efficient way, about getting innovation and creativity and creating partnerships to create bottom line impact. Because top line, bottom line, and broadening or widening the gap between those two curves, right? You want the top line to grow, but you want your costs to go down. So you open the aperture and your contribution margin or your margin is accretive to every dollar that you generate. And that comes from all these things at the same time creating a culture of a sense of belonging that is aligned with people's values. To generate shareholder value, because the worst thing you could be is the most philanthropic company in the world that went bankrupt. That did nobody any good.
The other big thing I'm about is technological incongruence. So I think electric cars are technologically incongruent.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think
True.
so is because Ford made the first electric car in 1901, and they did it for the wealthy because you had to hand crank the engine, they didn't have starters,
Right.
and they wanted their wealthy wives to be able to hit a button. So that was the first electric car. Internal combustion engines came away because of shareholder value, and the cost of cars went down, and it went away. Tesla, as a function of time, the used Tesla that's 10 years old, doesn't have the same value as a used internal combustion engine car because you have to go back down at some point in time.
Yeah.
So I struggle with whether or not the electric car will survive because of if everybody had an electric car, we'd have enough charging stations here to fix them.
Right.
Is one thing. I want you to talk about culture more. And the second thing is that in America tends to blame other countries for the cost of going carbon neutral. And they say, we're not going to spend our tax dollars if China and India do not join the crowd.
Yeah.
So we have this negative influence that happens here that causes this incongruence with everything that you're talking about, because they don't care after a while, because they say that no matter what we do, we're still going to go down that cliff.
Yeah. So for those of you on video, Dean talked about two really, really important topics: technological incongruence, and then carbon and the disparity around the world. As many explanations as there might be for centuries, where those parts of the world were not benefiting. So they're saying, and the examples you gave, India, China, Africa, they're saying, guys, let our per capita be half of yours, a third of yours, and don't impose. You have to take the share of what you have created. That's the rhetoric, right? Not the rhetoric, reality. So how do you start to fit these pieces? And this is purely Sanjay's hypothesis, or at least thought. Tesla and all of these things, these are interventions in the larger journey of mankind. Interventions by design come with incongruence. If you go to the Industrial Revolution and what colonization did around the world in terms of starving those that were not on the shores, that were the occupied, not the occupiers, incongruence has by definition results that are not at parity, that are not democratic, but they are interventions that try to create, a world that mankind evolves or humankind evolves. But this is, again, I'm getting on another one of my soapboxes. But I truly believe that if you look at history of all of these things that have happened going back maybe even before the Industrial Revolution, but that's well documented, and we can look at the Industrial Revolution and say wealth was created at the expense of some for others. Having said that, there were inventions that happened, and there was wealth that was generated for the globe, right? I mean, electricity and transportation and construction and materials and material science. Would it have happened? Could it have happened? Not because of, listen, I would never give colonization any credit at all. But would it have happened left to its own device? Maybe, maybe not, right? Because these interventions did create space. I'll take five more minutes? Okay, and I'll touch on two things. One of the things I said I would share with those of you that are listening for what it's worth is the three things I wish somebody had talked to me about just from my own experience. And I would start with, this idea of reinventing yourself. And I say this to, whenever I get a chance to, because I truly believe, don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. Don't be afraid to leave the industry you're in. I mean, if you look at where I've worked, automotive and aerospace and technology and chillers and buildings and then cloud across all industries. And this isn't just me kind of pontificating about what I've done right. That's not the point. The point is I was allowed opportunities. I was fortunate to, starting with Florida Tech. In fact, I came to Florida Tech to do a master's in operations research. And about maybe in my first quarter, we had quarters, not semesters, then at Florida Tech, you remember? I moved over to the business school. That's an opportunity. That's an opportunity that Florida Tech gave me. But reinventing yourself and molding yourself, I think a lot of times we constrain ourselves into what can I do? My first question when I was going to JLL is commercial real estate. Why do you even want to talk to me? I can't spell commercial real estate. And the answer from our chairman was, well, you've got a background in this, that, and as you went through all the list and global blah, blah, I'm like, okay, I checked all the boxes, let's talk, right? So I think these things are important to be able to take a risk, and I think individuals should do that. The second one I would say is communication, and I said this earlier, I'm just, listening skills, read with your eyes and listen with your eyes and listen with your ears and watch the body language. I mean, these are skills that are learned, but if you watch people, you're able to connect with them in a different way. You're able to communicate more effectively. And communication, reading, writing, just voracious reading is something that can only help. If you look at the top CEOs, there was another survey and study that was done around it. They read, I can't remember the exact number, so I won't say it, but it's in multiples more than the average individual, because they are able to take information and making reading just a habit over time. And the last thing I would say is, if you can communicate well, you're putting yourself out there. I think it's around this idea of empathy. Again, building on listening. Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, this is how I think about it, right? We all have either opportunities or a tendency to react. I'm going to yell at you. I'm mad at this. I'm upset at that. Do that, but do it thoughtfully in a strategic way. If you can stop yourself just reacting, when you are reacting, just make sure you've thought about it and you're saying, okay, today on this topic, I'm going to let everyone know. People talk about an example of Indira Nooyi, fellow Indian, just so happens, but it's a great example. And she went and talked to Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs said, Indira, go into the workplace, I'm paraphrasing, but go into the workplace and just make hell about something, anything. Because when you do, people will know what is important to you. And they will know, but that was a strategic plan to go make a point about something she was passionate about, but also letting her early direct reports know, don't screw with this woman, because when she's passionate about something, she's going to take down the walls. And that's a good example of doing something that's planned rather than reacting, because reacting is easy, right? External factors are always going to be there. Stuff is going to happen. How you internalize them, it's you that's only one person. You're the only one that reacts to those things. But that's me, my thoughts.
You have tremendous will. How do you develop self-motivation?
Oh boy. That's, so the question was, I'll use Dean's words. You have tremendous will. How do you develop self-motivation? I don't know if I have a good answer to it. I'll try.
If I could put it in my students, I'd be.
I mean, I guess that you could say, is it through encouragement that you received?
Yeah,
Positive
it's actually a really good
feedback?
point.
Somebody being negative and you decided I'm gonna.
Yeah, you know, I'll bridge to culture. One of the things that organizations suffer in this world that is hybrid and virtual is having mentors, mentorship, apprenticeship. Every one of us that is sitting here, you know, we all grew up. I mean, look at your histories, every one of you, regardless of where you are in your career. You could have worked 3 years or 4 years or 1 year or, you know, more years than I want to say. Well, 85 to now, do the math, right? I think we all had, I like the way John talks. I like the way he communicates. I like how precise she is. I like the way she comes into the room and occupies the room without saying a word. I like how he just goes quiet while he's speaking. But all of this, again, this goes back to communication, but mentorship, I like the way she looks at problems and in a meeting asks questions that seek to understand rather than, and consciously you couldn't make a list of this, but you learn from all of that. I think that has a lot to do, having the permission. And you know, Will, Ted, when you have $11 in your pocket and you come to Florida Tech, you just learn to live. I was showing her the mobile gas station on the corner of University and Babcock. And there's so many fun stories about, you know, because you didn't have the internet, you didn't speak like this, you didn't talk like this, you didn't have the same vernacular, the same language. One thing internet has done is it's Americanized the world, right? Mina, when she came to how many years? Since 5 years. Mina spoke like, you know, I mean, she didn't wonder, oh, what does this mean? You know, cultural norms have become, right? The world has become very comfortable. So I think some of that I will just attribute to just sheer survival. But I think I'm fortunate to have learned from people and had people that forgave my sins, I guess, or my mistakes.
You also imagine the possibilities, and I talk to my students about that all the time.
Yeah.
Imagine the possibilities of success. Some accept it.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful advice. Imagining the possibilities, not letting anything come in your way. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We've got plenty of drinks and some snacks over here if everyone wants to grab something to eat on your way out. And Sanjay, stick around for just a couple minutes.
Sure thing. Yeah.